The most dangerous moment in a relationship with a narcissist is not when they are shouting, attacking, or actively trying to discard you. It is the moment they suddenly go quiet and it feels as though you never existed at all. Because when a narcissist makes this choice, they are not coming back. They are not returning to explain themselves. They are not coming back to apologize. And they are not even interested in causing you further pain. Most people do not realize this is happening until it is already completely over. If this resonates with you, if you have felt that eerie, heavy silence and wondered why it hurt so much more than the chaos that came before, take a moment. Breathe. Stay with this conversation because understanding this specific moment is often the turning point where your true healing finally begins. When they are done, the relationship is over, but the illusion shatters for you. And that is not a sign of weakness. That is an awakening. When a narcissist is truly finished with you, there is no big explosion, no dramatic exit, and no final argument that provides you with any sense of clarity. Many people expect a loud, messy discard, but that kind of reaction is actually a sign of unfinished business. Rage, insults, blocking, smear campaigns, and sudden, dramatic withdrawals are all emotional behaviors. And emotional behavior proves that an attachment still exists. When they are genuinely finished, the shift is quieter, much colder, and far more unsettling. It feels like the lights were suddenly turned off in a room where you were still standing. One moment you were the center of their focus, and the next, you are treated as if you were never significant to them at all. This quiet exit happens because the narcissist no longer sees a return on their emotional investment. You are no longer providing the reactions they need to feed on. You might have stopped engaging, stopped trying to explain yourself, stopped defending your character, or simply stopped providing the level of emotional intensity they require. At that point, confrontation becomes inefficient for them. Drama costs a lot of energy, and narcissists are experts at conserving their energy the moment the payoff is gone. This silence is not maturity, it is total disengagement. What makes this especially destabilizing is that the narcissist does not announce this departure. There is no closure conversation because having that conversation would require emotional acknowledgement, which they are incapable of providing. Instead, contact simply fades or stops abruptly. Messages go unanswered. Familiar patterns vanish into thin air. You are not told what changed because, from their perspective, there is nothing that needs to be explained. They have already emotionally relocated to a new space. This is why people often feel more confused during this phase than during the times of overt abuse. Your mind keeps scanning for meaning, looking for a final clue, or searching for something to respond to, but there is nothing left to push against. That absence creates a profound sense of self-doubt. You start questioning whether you imagined the connection, whether you actually mattered, or whether you did something unforgivable to cause this. That confusion is not accidental. It is a natural byproduct of being discarded without a narrative or a reason. This quiet exit also protects the narcissist's fragile self-image. Leaving loudly always carries the risk of exposure, conflict, or accountability. Leaving silently allows them to preserve the fantasy that the relationship simply dissolved on its own without them having to answer for anything. You are no longer worth the effort of explaining, and that is precisely the message being communicated, not through spoken words, but through their complete disappearance. Emotional detachment is far more final than rage, insults, or even a dramatic shouting discard, because rage still contains a level of connection. Anger is a form of emotional engagement. Yelling, blaming, threatening, or punishing you means the narcissist is still invested in your reaction. They still want to be seen, felt, feared, or validated by you. Even cruelty requires a certain amount of attention. When a narcissist is angry with you, you still matter in their internal world. You still occupy space. You still have the power to affect their emotional state. And that power is exactly what sustains the entire dynamic. Detachment is something entirely different. Detachment means you no longer register as emotionally relevant to them. Your pain does not activate them. Your silence does not provoke them. Your presence no longer energizes them. This is not growth or healing on their part. It is a total psychological withdrawal. They have shut down the emotional channel entirely because it no longer serves their specific needs. Where rage says you hurt me or you challenge my control, detachment says you are no longer worth the emotional investment. This is why detachment feels so much colder and more destabilizing than the abuse itself. Abuse provides your nervous system with something to respond to. Detachment gives it nothing. The human brain is hardwired to seek resolution through interaction, even if that interaction is painful. When that interaction disappears, the bond does not instantly dissolve. Instead, it lingers, unanswered and unresolved. You may replay old conversations, search for hidden meaning, or wait for a response that will never come. Meanwhile, the narcissist has already emotionally exited. Detachment also serves to protect the narcissist's fragile self-image. Rage always risks exposure. Arguments can reveal cracks in their mask. Detachment avoids accountability entirely. By disengaging emotionally, they avoid any need for reflection, remorse, or repair. They do not have to admit to any wrongdoing if they simply stop caring. This allows them to move forward without ever confronting the harm they caused. They rewrite the history of the relationship as insignificant rather than as a failure. For the person left behind, this emotional cutoff can feel like you are being erased. This does not happen because the relationship lacked meaning, but because the relationship only had real, sustainable meaning to one side. The silence communicates a brutal message. It tells you not that you were wrong, but that you are no longer necessary. And that realization often hurts more than any insult ever could. Indifference is the true ending because it signals the complete absence of emotional investment. Cruelty, manipulation, and even abandonment still carry an emotional charge. They are active behaviors that require attention, intention, and engagement. Indifference requires none of that. When a narcissist becomes indifferent, you no longer serve any psychological function in their inner world. You are not someone they need to dominate, punish, impress, or extract emotion from. You are simply, fundamentally irrelevant. This is why indifference feels so dehumanizing. Human beings are wired to measure connection through emotional response. Even negative attention confirms your existence. Indifference denies it completely. When a narcissist reaches this stage, they do not try to win arguments, they do not defend their actions, and they do not try to reshape your perception of them. They stop caring how you see them because your perception no longer matters. Your feelings, your confusion, and even your intense pain no longer register as meaningful stimuli to them. Indifference also explains the sudden emotional flatness that so many people describe. There is no anger to respond to, no warmth to reach for, and no tension to resolve. Communication, if it exists at all, becomes mechanical, hollow, or non-existent. The warmth that once hooked you is gone, and the hostility that once terrified you is gone too. What remains is an emotional emptiness. This is not peace, it is simply an absence. For many survivors, this phase triggers a deeper level of grief than the abuse itself. Abuse allows you to believe that the relationship still has emotional substance, even if it is toxic. Indifference forces you to confront the painful reality that the emotional reciprocity you were fighting for never truly existed. The bond you felt was real to you, but it was conditional and entirely replaceable to them. Indifference also serves a protective function for the narcissist. It prevents any kind of introspection. Caring, even in a negative way, could eventually lead to guilt, shame, or a sense of responsibility. Indifference shuts those doors completely. By emotionally nullifying you, they can move forward without ever integrating the reality of what they did or how it affected you. This is why chasing explanations during this phase only deepens the wound. You are seeking meaning from someone who has already emotionally exited. The lack of response is the response. Indifference is not a phase to work through. It is the psychological endpoint. And recognizing that truth, as painful as it is, often marks the beginning of reclaiming your own emotional reality. Narcissists do not stop engaging because they have suddenly gained insight or emotional maturity. They stop because they have secured a replacement supply. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because it completely dismantles the hope that their disappearance means they are finally reflecting, feeling remorse, or experiencing growth. In reality, their emotional system is purely transactional. When one source stops producing enough admiration, validation, obedience, or emotional intensity, they simply redirect their attention elsewhere. The shift can appear abrupt, but internally, it is often calculated and already well underway. A replacement supply does not have to be better, healthier, or more compatible than you. It only has to be new. Novelty provides the stimulation they crave. A fresh person has not yet set boundaries, challenged their narrative, or seen behind the mask. That makes them efficient. Once that new source is in place, the old one becomes unnecessary to them. This is why the emotional cutoff feels so sudden and why the silence becomes the final, loudest message they will ever send. You are not being left because you failed. You are being left because you are no longer useful to them in the way they need. In the same way, this replacement explains the chilling, unnatural calm that follows their departure. There is no longing, no processing, and absolutely no grief on their end. Their emotional energy has already been entirely reassigned to a new target. While you are still in the middle of processing the loss, replaying past moments in your head, and searching for some kind of meaning, they are already busy mirroring someone new. They are telling a revised, sanitized version of their story and positioning themselves as someone who is completely unchanged and unaffected by the past. The speed of this transition can feel like a crushing betrayal layered on top of the abandonment. What makes this phase so incredibly destabilizing is that narcissists rarely make any announcement of this shift. There is no honest admission that they are moving on or that the relationship has changed. Instead, you are left to sense it through their growing emotional absence, their delayed responses, or their sudden, palpable disinterest. If you try to confront them about this, they will likely deny it or minimize your concerns entirely because being transparent would expose the actual mechanics of their behavior. Acknowledging that they have found a replacement supply would require them to finally confront their own repetitive patterns, and those patterns are a direct threat to the fragile self-image they have built. This is also why trying to compete or prove your worth at this stage is so deeply damaging to your own mental health. You are no longer participating in a normal relational dynamic. You are caught in a supply economy that you never agreed to join. Their departure is not a verdict on your personal value or your replaceability as a human being. It is simply evidence of how they regulate themselves emotionally. Once the function you served is successfully outsourced, the attachment they had to you dissolves without any ceremony, leaving you alone to process an ending that they already abandoned internally long ago. Closure is never given when a narcissist is truly finished with you. True closure requires the recognition of the impact one person had on another, and that kind of recognition is a direct threat to their self-concept. To offer you any form of closure, they would have to acknowledge that something real actually occurred between you, that genuine emotions were involved, and that their actions had lasting consequences. That level of acknowledgement introduces the possibility of accountability, and accountability is a force that would destabilize the carefully constructed narrative they live inside. So, instead of ending things with clarity, they choose to end them with complete absence. This lack of closure is not accidental or careless. It is highly protective of their own ego. By refusing to explain, discuss, or process the ending, the narcissist maintains a sense of psychological control even in the middle of their disengagement. You are left holding all the heavy, unanswered questions while they walk away completely unburdened. The power imbalance continues, just in a much quieter, more insidious form. You are left searching for meaning in the ruins, while they have already erased the need for it. People often misinterpret this sudden silence as confusion or emotional overwhelm on the narcissist's part, but that is rarely the case. In reality, it is a calculated form of avoidance. Conversations about endings invite deep reflection, and for them, reflection invites the kind of shame they cannot tolerate. Rather than risk that internal discomfort, they opt out of the interaction entirely. Messages go unanswered. Any attempts you make to talk are ignored or met with vague, dismissive responses. The door is not slammed shut behind them. It is left hanging open just enough to keep you suspended in uncertainty. This suspended state is deeply distressing because the human nervous system naturally seeks resolution. You may find yourself replaying interactions, rewriting texts in your head, or imagining one final conversation that will finally make everything make sense. But closure from a narcissist is a logical contradiction. They are entirely invested in protecting themselves, not in helping you heal. Any explanation they might eventually offer would be self-serving, heavily distorted, or completely incomplete, and would often be far more confusing than helpful. The absence of closure also gives them the freedom to rewrite the story privately. Without a final shared conversation, there is no mutual ending. There is only their version of events and your lingering questions. They can minimize the relationship, deny its importance, or recast themselves as the reasonable person who simply decided to move on. You are left without a narrative anchor, which can make the entire loss feel unreal and invalidating. Understanding that real closure will never come from them is a painful but absolutely necessary shift in your perspective. The silence is not a puzzle that you need to solve. It is the final conclusion. The clarity you are seeking cannot be extracted from someone who refuses to emotionally acknowledge what occurred. When you stop waiting for answers from them, you begin the slow, difficult process of generating your own meaning. This meaning becomes grounded not in their absence, but in your own reality. Your confusion is not a personal failure or a sign that you are inherently weak. It is simply evidence of the psychological whiplash created by a sudden, jarring emotional disappearance. When a narcissist is done, the ending does not follow normal relational rules. There is no gradual distancing, no honest conversation, and no mutual understanding. Instead, the emotional connection collapses without any explanation, leaving your mind desperately trying to reconcile two completely incompatible realities: the intensity that once existed and the absolute emptiness that followed. This confusion arises because the entire bond was built on inconsistency. Periods of intense attention, intimacy, or validation were always followed by withdrawal, criticism, or cold distance. Your nervous system adapted to this unpredictability by staying constantly alert, searching for patterns, and trying to anticipate their next shift. When the narcissist finally disengages completely, that system does not just shut off, it keeps scanning for cues that are no longer coming. The silence becomes louder than any argument could ever be. Many people mistake this confusion for lingering attachment or a personal failure to move on. In truth, it is simply the lingering residue of emotional conditioning. You were trained to respond, to repair, and to self-correct in order to restore the connection. When there is no longer anything to respond to, your brain fills in the gaps with intense self-doubt. You may wonder if you misread everything, if you imagined the closeness, or if you were somehow responsible for the abrupt ending. That questioning is not a form of insight. It is a sign of disorientation. The narcissist, meanwhile, is not confused at all. Their clarity comes from their ability to emotionally disengage, not from any deep understanding. They did not process the ending. They simply exited it. That asymmetry is exactly what creates the painful imbalance. One person is left trying to make sense of a story that ended without a final chapter, while the other has already replaced the book. This is why your confusion often peaks after the contact stops, not before. The absence of stimulation removes the familiar chaos that once kept you focused outward on them. Without it, your mind turns inward, searching for coherence. But coherence cannot be found in a dynamic that was never built on true emotional reciprocity. Recognizing that your confusion is a perfectly predictable response to an unnatural ending is crucial. It shifts the question from what is wrong with me to what actually happened to me. That reframing is often the first step toward regaining your own psychological footing because it places the confusion where it belongs. It sees it as a consequence of emotional abandonment rather than a reflection of your own worth or your own perception. The silence that follows is not a sign of calm, mutual space, or emotional peace. It is deliberate. When a narcissist goes silent after they are done with you, that silence serves a very specific function. It allows them to disengage without any confrontation, avoid any accountability for their actions, and maintain a sense of control without having to actively exert it. Silence becomes a powerful strategy, not a reflection of any inner stability. This strategic silence works because it shifts the entire emotional burden onto you, leaving you to deal with the weight of the silence alone.